Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm joined today by our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
That is going fine. Thank you very much.
You don't sound that
I was
convinced.
I was going to say something in some foreign language, but then I couldn't
That's all
remember
right.
what it was.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, we got a bunch of things to cover today. We've got some solid state battery news for Toyota, some
Finally,
news about Tesla or Toyota's current EV plans, which it seems to change all the time.
with the weather, it seems. Yeah.
You know, Tesla and Uber integration. We haven't had a good article about sailing ships in a while, so we're going to have one today about sailing ships.
Oh, goody, goody.
And let's see, we got something about America's reached peak gasoline consumption,
Yeah, that one's an interesting.
and something about the Department of Energy report talking about a striking price drop on EVs. So, anyways, we'll get to that. And as usual, my computer is not enjoying itself today.
Oh
So
boy.
we'll see where we get with
So I have to
some of
be
this
ready to
today.
improvise then, right?
Maybe. I mean, some days I'm just not sure what's going on. Oh,
Well, you look good on
anyway.
this end. So
Yeah, well, I can see things going on, but we'll see where that goes. So, anyways, let's start out. Let's talk a little bit about Toyota and solid state batteries. So, where this is going, um, Toyota has an all solid state EV battery that's getting the green light in Japan. So, the Japan's Ministry of Trade and Industry has certified or given approval for their next generation EV batteries, which are solid state. Solid state holds more energy and has less risk of fire and a few other things. And I know that this is considered to be something, the solid state thing is considered to be something that would affect, aircraft or other uses. But here with the battery thing, this is kind of a interesting play. So Toyota released its EV battery roadmap last year, which has several types of batteries they want to work with, and they're looking at trying to get, what is this, like a 500-mile range
mhm.
on these, which would be a drastically, well, it should improve cost and distance on like the BZ4X. I don't know. You'd think Toyota could come up with something better than the Busy Forks, but
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, well, let's see. So the first solid state batteries are due out around 2028 with over 620 miles of range and 10-minute fast charging. Now,
Changer.
um, yeah. So that's really a big deal. When I see something from Toyota, then I have a lot of, well, if Toyota's really going to do this, I mean, we see Toyota saying all kinds of different stuff. It's like, we're only going to do hydrogen. We're only going to do hybrids. We're only going to do
Yeah.
this. And Toyota is undisputedly the hybrid leader.
Yeah.
Okay. Not plug-in hybrid, but just overall in the hybrid space, they are
Right.
definitely
Yeah,
the best in the world.
they pretty well own it. Yeah.
Yeah. But up until now, their entries into the all electric have been limited. They have thrown some money at hydrogen, and I don't know where they're sitting with that. I mean, they're definitely off in a strange place in the hydrogen world, because while they're making the Mirai, they're not wanting to.
Well, yeah. Well, the latest is that they've got I think it's like a fifth generation fuel cell that they're going to supply to BMW, who's going to put it in their iX5 supposedly, or something comparable to the iX5, although it could be the Neue Klasse. So I think that's what they're looking for partners, and BMW is the one that's interested in that. So I posted that on the RSS
I
feed.
saw that.
So yeah, it's still alive, despite all the obstacles and things that are standing in the way, lack of infrastructure. Supposedly
Right,
there's an article about the you can pick up a Mirai really cheap now, right? Well,
right.
yeah, because there's nowhere to fuel the thing
Fuel it.
unless you've got to deal with Air Liquide or somebody like that. How you're
Yeah,
gonna have
I
to.
don't know what to think of that. I don't even think,
Yeah.
do they actually sell the Mirai? I was thinking it was only leased.
It's probably
I could be
leased,
wrong.
and it would be restricted, I would think, to California. So
California. Yeah, because just not a whole lot of other options. But this is interesting. Toyota is investing $7 billion to boost domestic battery production in Japan. Now, they're investing 30 billion into battery production in the United States. So, but that's just regular EV batteries, not this solid state stuff.
yeah.
But this is a big step forward for Toyota, and
Well,
who
they have
knows
been.
where that'll go.
Yeah, they've been promising that. I don't know. I don't know what the pace is. Whether it's just simply a technological materials issue that it just takes that long for scientists to come up with the right blend of materials in the process to build them, or whether it's a lack of budget but they've been promising solid. I mean, this has been their holy grail for at least a decade,
Right,
and
right.
so now maybe 3 years from now, what is it? Yeah, well, a little over 3 years from now, maybe we'll start to see some of those promises being fulfilled. I'm almost getting the sense that they've caught the Musk syndrome, right? You promise things, and maybe sometime in the. I mean, where's the second generation Roadster?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
we'll see what comes out with the Robotaxi in what is it, October, something like that. So
yeah. I don't know if they're still on for that or not. I mean, it's interesting. Musk promises certain things, and eventually they pretty much all come true, right? But it's just like it may be a couple of years later, right?
yeah,
You know, we got the Cybertruck. I think we all thought the Cybertruck might arrive a year or two sooner than it did, but you know, like Musk has said, production in the automotive space is difficult. It's one
oh
thing
well,
to build a prototype; it's a whole other thing to
but that
actually
being
go to production.
but that being said, it's outsold Ford F-150 Lightning, and it's outsold Rivian. So
Combined.
yeah, combined. So
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
pretty impressive.
it's not my cup of tea. I wouldn't want one if you gave it to me. But well, if you gave it to me, maybe I could sell it and make some money. But it certainly doesn't do anything for me. But yeah, I mean,
No, I get
it
that.
comes about. But there are lots of things he's promised to happen that have taken a long, long time and still haven't quite got there. I mean, autonomous driving. You see all kinds of it's great, it's wonderful, it's the next thing, just slice cheese. But then you also hear guys that are more expert in this area of autonomy and automation, and they said, nah, it ain't ready for prime time. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I've seen some discussion from, say, like the CEO of Uber, versus talking on his take on Waymo and Tesla, and the idea. I mean, I've seen people talk about the idea that you could take your Tesla and send it out to work at night. Like
Yeah,
when you're not driving the car,
that,
you can send
yeah,
it out to go be part of the
yeah.
taxi pool or whatever.
That's Elon's pitch. Yeah,
Yeah, but the problem with that is, um, I don't know how you program the AI to know exactly where to stop and pick somebody up. Okay, because in that space, if you've ever been picked up anywhere other than the airport or a hotel where there's an obvious place to be picked up, if you get picked up like at bars and things like that, well, there's not necessarily a place for the driver to park.
Right.
right? So they'll roll up and they'll turn on their hazards and wait for the passenger. The passenger will get in the car. But when
Right.
you're dealing with that with um, AI, and I realize that they can make the AI think a lot like a human, but I think there's going to be some challenges as to knowing exactly where
Yeah.
to
We
go and get someone.
Yeah, my daughter and wife and I were in Seattle back in June and went to an event downtown Seattle at,
Hmm.
ironically, the Moore Theater. No relationship, but spelled the same. And so we were going to, she dialed up, plugged in and had an Uber car coming. He couldn't find us, and we couldn't find him, and eventually, the two of us met. He came up and said, "Well, are you the Moores?" Yeah, that's us. So we go up the street and across the street and get into the car. But yeah, that for a human being, that's an issue. How you handle it with a
Right.
car that's empty. So
Well, I'm just saying that there's definitely some differences there. I don't see where AI will easily be able to take them. Now, if you're just talking about airport rides, like with Waymo, I think that's a big part of their thing is because they're down in Phoenix, and I haven't taken one because I traveled there quite a few times, but I always seem to have somebody picking me up when
right,
I'm there. But I could see taking one, from an airport perhaps to a defined residence where it could pull in the driveway kind of thing,
hmm,
and you're not having issues with blocking traffic, things like that. But I don't know. It's an interesting kind of concept there. But the problem is, I think that uh, when you think about that, you would think of it then as driving just right back to the airport to pick somebody up again, right? But I'm not sure that's really a what do you call it, a profitable route if the vehicle's constantly just running around empty. So they usually try to keep the
yeah,
cars filled up, right? They keep trying to go from dropping one person off, picking up somebody who's close, taking them
right,
somewhere else, right? As opposed to just driving around empty all the time. So, anyways, but let's get back to Toyota.
okay,
So, Toyota has announced that they plan to do a tenfold boost in EV sales by 2026. So we are. We're kind of getting into the tail end of 2024. So we're talking about these 2026 models coming out in a year, right?
right,
So they're aiming to sell 1 million or more EVs in 2026, and also to start making its next gen batteries in Japan by 2026. Well, this article says including solid state cells. Now, our other article with the 620-mile range ones was said to expect those by 2028.
28 exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do get some conflicting news in some of this. We're aware of this. We don't.
Well, it's obvious Toyota isn't quite o- on the same page within the company, because they're pulling back. We're going to focus on hybrids. We're not going to do much with. Then they come out and say they're going to do this. So I don't know.
Oh,
It's
this news comes from Reuters. This news comes from
oh,
Reuters, and
that explains it.
yeah, so Reuters is probably making some crap up. Who knows? Reuters wants this to happen in 2026.
Well,
It's
I want it
you
to
know,
happen. You know.
yeah. Reuters is kind of, I've said it before. I don't know. They get writers who are all over the place, and I don't know what some of these people believe. There's certainly, I think they're stuck in a closet somewhere where they don't actually get out in the world and see anything going on, is my biggest observation. But anyways, no offense to anybody at Reuters, you just don't really seem to know what you're doing in the EV space. But
Why don't you tell us how you really feel, Dave?
yeah, yeah,
There
I
goes
don't
our
know.
Reuters subscription. Thank you.
Yeah, I had somebody was commenting on one of our we did some presentation on hydrogen, and we edited it and made it into a shorter video and put it up on the site, and it's had good viewership. And somebody was saying about how we didn't really present a lot of great information in that, and I was going to write them back something. I haven't gotten around to it yet. The MIT study that we were citing was a nothing burger. I mean, I'm just like, don't give this guy a PhD.
Yeah.
This really, I mean, the guy did a lot of work, this really didn't show us any. That was the one that showed us where people were spending $1,300 extra a year in stores if they were charging their, you know, or it might have been something about the chargers. It was some. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was the MIT study on making hydrogen from like coffee and other weird stuff, coffee grounds or something like that from Starbucks. Yeah. And, some of these stories we get really either the person who wrote the story didn't understand the study or the study really didn't give a lot of information, but there really isn't a whole lot of like breaking news in
Yeah.
some of these stories. And
Well,
we get that.
and in some cases, what could happen is the author came across something interesting. It was a study, and and all he had access to was the abstract, right?
Yeah.
And then sort of weave a story based on other information you could collect somewhere, and then fit the findings of the abstract into a story that 600 words or something. So,
Yeah, and folks, often I will be critical of some of the stories we're reporting, and it's more for the fact that we got some news, there was a big headline, then when we go through the article, it was pretty much nothing really happened. Or there wasn't really any news. And so when we make the smaller videos that are cut out and edited from these, I usually just skip all those. I mean, we'll do an hour show, and we at best we maybe use 10 minutes of content from an hour show or something else, because a lot of it is really, really aggravating, and it's not really, a great use of our time on some of that.
Is that our fault or the reporter's fault? I probably,
They were
partially
just desperate
their
for an
fault.
article, I guess.
Yeah,
That's what I think a lot of it is. They're desperate to crank out an article. I think a
right.
lot of these people are just paid, 10, $15 for every article they write, and they're given a whole bunch of topics, and
They're not Woodard and Bernstein.
yeah, I don't know. It's rare when we see something that is really, truly groundbreaking
Yeah.
in this field and
Now
some of these stories.
that being said, there's a really interesting story we're going to talk about peak gasoline. He did some serious
Yes.
research on this.
Um, anyways, let's move on just a little bit. I wanted to talk about, we were talking about the thing with Tesla versus Uber. Well, this one is Tesla partners with Uber.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little different. So Tesla has integrated Uber driver navigation directly into its vehicles. So now an Uber driver, instead of just using their little phone with the navigation on it, can have it on the big LCD panel
The big
that's
panel. Yeah.
going there. Should make things a little bit easier for the driver. It might be a more enjoyable experience for the passenger. And where this is significant is other vehicles offer this feature, but it's usually through Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. Well, Tesla's never, I guess, wanted to have those things integrated into their platform, so they don't have that. And so this is kind of a big deal for them. And also, apparently, it's going to somehow have Uber be able to monitor the available charge so that it's not giving them rides that are going to take them too far away from a charger. Yeah, with how many,
Right.
what the mileage is that's remaining. I would suspect that Uber drivers probably get enhanced range because they're not probably driving all that fast. Wouldn't you think? I mean,
Well,
you
I
think
don't.
about the driving people around towns are probably not doing a whole lot of 80-mile-per-hour driving, which would reduce the range.
Particularly if they're on the I-5 driving through downtown Seattle at rush hour. You're
Yeah.
creeping along at about 5 miles an hour if you're good. So yeah, my experience is I've never ridden in an Uber that was a Tesla. Most of the time our daughter has very generously provided us with a black car, typically a Cadillac Escalade or something like that, to pick us up from the airport in Seattle and take us up north to Everett, and then the same thing going back home. So never had that, but I can see where, because we were talking about earlier, is that So I asked the driver once he drops us off, I says, well, where are you going now? Well, I'm going to go home and have dinner or whatever, and
Yeah.
then, so obviously they're trying to make the maximum use of, of their time. And, but then again, they're not dealing with, do I have range anxiety, because they got a great big 20-gallon tank and that Escalade.
So when I take West Coast Ubers, they've almost exclusively been Tesla Model 3s.
Okay.
And all the drivers that I've talked to about it have owned the cars. Some of them have been guys who drive 100,000 miles a year. And it's been interesting hearing a
Yeah.
contrast. Like one guy was telling me that he had previously had a Camry, and he was telling me how much he was saving. He was driving like 8,000 miles a month. He was saving 2 oil changes a month.
Wow.
Plus, it was a pretty big amount of fuel he was saving. So he was, for as much as he was driving, even though he was probably charging at home, he would also have to charge a supercharger at some time during the day to be
Right.
driving as much as he was driving. But that being said, it was a pretty, it was a pretty big amount. And he was, saying how much less expensive it was, how much, better off he was with the Tesla versus the Camry.
The Camry, yeah.
And but when I've been in Miami, almost everybody seems to be driving a Corolla hybrid.
That's an
I mean,
Uber. Yeah.
yeah, for the Ubers. Yeah, so it's been. I've had exceptions. I mean, there's a lot of people that drive minivans.
Right.
I've had Tahoes and Suburbans and stuff like that, but those ones are typically, because they have different levels of Uber. You have your basic Uber
Right.
X, then you have XL, and you have Uber Black. And so like the
Right.
Suburbans would be part of the Black, or the Tahoes as well. And the minivans would be part of Uber XL. That's usually meant for somebody who has a lot of passengers.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I suspect they don't stay completely busy on those, so they'll take the other riders as well. And I ride some other services. There's some other ones out there. There's Lyft, and there's one called NDrive that's in South Florida. I've never taken. There's a couple of others out there called like Rides. It starts with a WRIDZ.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Obviously, if you were in Phoenix, you could take Waymo, which is all the autonomous cars.
Right.
But once again, like we were discussing, not so. That would be more for an airport ride. Not sure how integrated that gets. All right. Anyways, let's move on and let's talk about where we're at with peak gasoline consumption.
Yeah.
So,
This is an interesting story. He makes a point. He says, "I'm not talking about peak oil." And if you've been around EV world for any appreciable length of time, I've been talking about peak oil since I think it first came up. In fact, I think I've got a book on the back shelf here about the gentleman who is probably the expert in that topic. Of course, all that talk about peak oil in the 90s did not reflect or take into account fracking, because once they
right.
could figure out how to frack, then you could find more ways to force that petroleum out of the pores in the rock. So what we thought was going to be a peak topping of how much oil we could extract, and that would be sometime in the mid 20 teens, obviously has been pushed back. So he's not talking. Said, I'm not talking about peak oil. What I'm talking about is peak gasoline, because as he points out, says oil is used for lots of other things besides being refined into a fuel to power your automobile. So I'm talking about the use of gasoline in our private cars. Looks like, and he's got a lot of charts. If you go through the article, he's got a lot of charts in that have come from authoritative Department of Energy and Department of Transportation and others that indicates that in fact we've steadily is increased, because obviously population has increased, the size of the vehicles have increased, and that number has gone up, and then it plateaus. and it plateaus actually before COVID. It plateaus. We used the most amount of gasoline. We purchased and burned the most amount of gasoline in 2018, and it has not recovered appreciably since. In fact, it's actually had even a couple of dips, partial which, of course, you can lay the blame on COVID for that. But
Right.
his point is that with more people beginning to shift over to hybrids, right? Yeah, I'm not quite sure about if I want I want an all electric car. I'd like the flexibility. I mean, I'm that way. I've got a Prius sitting upstairs just for the purpose of if I have to drive outside of Omaha, I've got a car to do
Right.
that. And that car was paid for a long time ago. That's the only thing I have to worry about is insurance. And it's so old now, our insurance and taxes, my taxes are less than $50 on the car. It's just it's a used car. So it's no real expense. And since we drive the electric all the time, there's no gas that goes in it.
Right.
And the oil changes are like once or twice a year at best. So that's, and he's attributing that people are beginning to realize, well, if I'm not really comfortable with all electric, I'll go with a hybrid. And so he's starting to see that hybrids and plug-in hybrids are really starting to become a thing with people who want to transition away from internal combustion engine entirely, but just aren't quite there. Maybe 40% of the people live in multi-family housing, and there's little provision for them to be able to charge their all-electric car. So you can understand that. So that's where I think the point he's making is that we just aren't going to see that slope continue to rise. It's going to peak, and eventually what we'll see is eventual decline in that. At least that's the case I think he's making.
Well, we discussed this before. I've seen where some of the oil companies basically stated that at some point in the future, if all 100% of cars selling are electric, let's say in like 2040, it would potentially lower the global oil usage by about 15%.
Yeah, because you still have
that wasn't yeah, but it wasn't as big of a number as I think people would really expect.
Well, now, okay, let's take into consideration that there is some vested interest on the part of the oil company with their investors to say, don't worry, there'll still be a big market out there. Keep giving us your money.
Yeah,
so I think there's a little bit of vested interest there.
Yeah, but none of them are like needing to raise money, if you know what I mean. If anything, it's just a matter of the stocks still sell.
I've seen stories out there where it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to raise the capital they need to do additional exploration.
Oh no, there's no question. There's no question. Yeah. And oil fields have gone from selling from 4 times profits about 5-6 years ago to only selling for 2 times profits right now. They're considered to be at a bargain, but the problem is the buyers pretty much have to have the cash because people like BlackRock aren't.
They're not giving money.
They're not lending money on those projects anymore.
Yep.
So it's definitely changed the face of things.
And that's becoming a global phenomenon. That's just not BlackRock. There's a lot of guys that are firms that used to invest in that field, and now for whatever reason, whether it's they're concerned about the environment or whether they're concerned about a stranded asset, and a change in the political climate and all those issues. So I think the guy makes a good point in this article that we probably aren't going to see a continued gradual climb in gasoline use, at least in the United States and probably globally.
Right. All right. Let's talk about this Department of Energy report. So, striking price drop for critical EV component, now almost as cheap as gas-powered cars. Well, that's actually, so you got a couple of things there. So one, we're talking about the United States here, because we already know that EVs outside of the United States and China are cheaper to make than gas cars. There's absolutely no question. You know, you got all the BYDs and a couple other brands. We got cars in China selling from $5,000 to $9,000 US,
Yeah,
and for a
there's
new
a
car.
there's a article I posted in the RS stream that actually asks that question. How do the Chinese make their cars so cheap? I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I posted it. So if you're interested, maybe try to do a search for, cheap or China or something like that in the search engine, and it'll probably pull up that article. So,
Oh, that might be one to save for Mike for tomorrow.
right. That'd probably be a good
Anyways,
one.
but the big thing is the change in the cost of batteries. Batteries are by far the biggest cost in an EV.
Yeah.
And while we previously reported that between 2008 and 2023, a 15-year span, the price of the lithium ion batteries dropped 90%.
90%.
90%.
Yeah.
Now, it's expected in the next 2 years, the price of lithium ion batteries will halve again. And at sometime, maybe 5 years from now, they'll be a quarter of the price they are now.
Yeah.
And so this, while people are always saying, oh, it's because Musk is dumping cars because they're not selling or blah, 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 whatever. And the truth is there's more EVs selling than ever,
Yeah.
and some of that's incentives, but they're starting to get to a point now where they can do this. And part of it is they've figured out how to build them cheaper, and they're also getting technology that's allowing them to make the batteries cheaper and better. The
And more
technology is
efficient.
advancing in the batteries.
Yeah.
And I keep comparing this to how computers used to be, like from like 1995 to 2010, where every 2 years you could get twice as much computer for the same price. And it's starting to get that way with electric cars.
Gordon Moore's law. Yeah.
Oh God, more stuff. More.
Sorry, no relation to me, but
Yeah.
I wish, but that it was Gordon Moore that came up with that. Every 2 years the price of computing power increases.
Right.
Doubles, something like that. So I don't remember exactly. And somebody feel free to correct me. But we're seeing the same effect starting to happen with the electric car. And why not? A car today is nothing but a rolling computer anymore. Yeah.
So according to Cox Automotive, batteries make up about 40% of the cost of the vehicle. And so in a couple of years, when they have again, that's basically the cars are going to be 20% cheaper for the manufacturer to make.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big change. When you keep thinking about how bad inflation's been the last few years and stuff like that, yet somehow EVs keep coming down in price. I mean, in 2020, people could sell their used cars for more than what the car was worth 2 years earlier. Because I've known people who bought used cars like in 2019, and then like in 2021, they were selling them because they were being offered more by used car dealers than what they'd paid for the car originally, and they'd driven it for 2 years.
Yeah. That was COVID, and that was the problem with getting the chips for the cars. So
Right. Wasn't really a lot to this, but the article goes on to talk about the Biden administration provided grants totaling $521 million for national initiatives to expand access to and efficiency of EV chargers. Now, one of the things with this is when we look at a lot of the electric vehicles, like some cars, like the the Chevy Bolt, it's not really a great car to take on the road because it doesn't charge well at superchargers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got some issues with different ones, and you're starting to get more and more chargers out there that can charge up a car in a hurry. And so, you're seeing some of this. The Department of Energy report really didn't have a lot of news in this particular regard, but it's significant in that people keep waiting, They keep thinking there's going to be something changing, and the EVs are definitely getting cheaper. All right, so I'm still having computer issues. I am not going to be able to share screen on this. You could do this one, Bill. But this, do you have the article about the wind-powered cargo ship?
Not readily available. No.
Okay. So, anyways, this is kind of funny because we've had articles about people adding giant sails. What was it? Was it Cargill? It was Cargill that made the giant
Right.
sails that went up on the cargo ship. And Cargill is the second largest privately owned company in the United States. And we think of them mainly as being in agriculture because
Right.
in the part of the world that Bill or I are in, Cargill is big in different
Hmm.
things in agriculture. It's
Yep.
just fact of life. But anyways, in this particular case, a French startup
Yeah.
launched a new cargo ship that sailed from France to New York, loaded with hundreds of pallets of champagne, wine, and cognac. It was the
Yep.
first time in nearly a century the large cargo ship crossed the Atlantic. It says powered almost entirely by the wind. So I
Yeah. About
suspect it
90,
has
90
other.
plus percent. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, the French startup that designed the ship, called the TOWT, the Transoceanic Wind Transport,
Right.
argues that sailing cargo ships can viably compete with container ships running on fossil fuels. We know the wind is abundant. We've known it for centuries, says Guillaume Legrand, the startup's co-founder and president. The meteorological models, the satellite communications, the routing intelligence that we can put behind it make wind a reliable source of propulsion. I'm
Yeah.
just kind of laughing because we're going to get this comments about, oh, let's start riding horses again, you know. But
Oh
the
no.
one
Oh
thing
no.
is
No. 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 No.
the
Yeah.
sailboats aren't leaving sailboat poop. Okay, so
No. They're
that's one thing that's different, right?
interesting. There's a gentleman, an English gentleman, that bought a rotting, literally rotting uh, sailboat from built in 1910. And this is the boat was the Tally Ho. He bought it and spent like the last 4 years, 5 years, completely rebuilding that boat for literally from the keel up. Everything had because it was all rotten. He had to basically, but he built it. So he built this and he did the restoration up in the Puget Sound area. And so he's now this summer and into early fall, he's actually begun now to sail it. Right, he's got it where it's watertight and it's fully functional. And so I was watching the video a few days ago of his trip, and so he's sailing basically on the islands that are part of the British Columbia and going up like towards Alaska in that area. And
Mm-hmm.
he's sailing along, and they've got a drone that he sends out, and they film the ship as it's sailing. And this particular segment was all of the whales that they saw. And I'm thinking, well, sure, they'd see a lot of whales, right? Because they're not sitting there. All they're doing is cruising along, and the hiss of the boat in the water is all the sound it's making, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
having a noisy engine driving the whales away. So the whales are just merrily breaching, and the tails are coming up and go. And I thought, what a beautiful thing. And that's what these French guys are doing, which is, I'm a huge Patrick O'Brien fan. If none of you guys, if maybe somebody listeners might know Patrick O'Brien, is a guy who wrote novels in the spirit of the old Hornblower novels. So it's basically an English warship and the crew and the captain set in the Napoleonic period. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm enthralled by that whole thing. I used to actually have a little sailboat, so I know a little bit about sailing, and that it makes so much sense because the reason why one of the reasons why we had these tramp steamers, right,
Mm-hmm.
was because the advent of those was because there was time sensitive cargo, right?
Right.
So the whole reason we had the era of the big like ships like the Cutty Sark, which basically are the TOWT, is essentially the same dimensions as the Cuddy Sark, which is, of course, still on display in London. So that technology, so they're carrying really a non-perishable product. In fact, the older the product is, the better. In fact, I was amused, when they mentioned cognac, because I actually, as a college student, had an opportunity to visit Cognac, France, and to actually go through the Martel distillery, I guess is what you would call it. So I kind of have a little bit of attachment to that. But this is brilliant. Now, the one question I had, okay, what are you guys taking back, right? You bring, I don't know, California wine back to France? I doubt it. So what are they taking back? So what they're doing is once they drop the wine off, and I assume probably the port of New York or somewhere, that they will then sail down the coast, and maybe they'll pick up some cargo, non-perishable cargo, whatever that might be, to take down the coast, and they'll then go to South America, probably Brazil, I would think, and pick up coffee beans, right? Again, a relatively non-perishable product, and then they take the coffee beans back to Europe. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I'm pleased to see that. In fact, I think what they ought to do, here's what they ought to do: drop the champagne and the pallets of wine and cognac off in New York, pick up passengers, and take passengers to the Caribbean, and then go on south, because I tell you, I would sign up right now to have a 5-7 day voyage on that sailing ship. They probably don't have provisions for passengers, but I'd love to do that. And I think there'd probably a lot of other people who would love that experience. Well, we've got already cruise lines that operate ships of that nature, so it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't offer that as that leg from New York to Barbados or wherever before they head on down to Buenos Aires or wherever they're going.
So here's something interesting, Bill. So they have sort of regenerative braking on this ship too.
Oh yeah.
So when the wind is strong enough and the ship is moving quickly, the propellers and the engines can spin backwards, generating power from the wake on the water,
it's
and the energy can be used to run electronics on board from the kitchen to ventilation.
Exactly. In fact, that's exactly the same thing that Leo has on the Tally Ho. That's where we had a decision. Well, what are we going to power this? All electric? Are we going to power just a Yanmar diesel, or are we going to take and do a hybrid? He put a hybrid in. That's what they do. They can, if they're underway and they have enough power can be generated, they can do that with recharging the batteries on the Tally Ho.
Well, it's diesel electric. It's diesel electric as far as the other power.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Brands can add a QR code to their labels that links to data about the CO2 savings from each journey.
Yep.
Let's see.
Interestingly, they're doing that with cars now. They have to, these cars that are coming out, they have to have a battery passport.
Yeah.
And so they mount that QR code in the door. So if the person is interested in, are the batteries on this car, have they been responsibly sourced? And you can put your phone on it and it'll pop up and show that this particular batteries that are in this car have been sustainably and responsibly sourced.
So currently they have 2 of these ships, and there's 6 more on order, and they hope to eventually have hundreds of vessels.
Yep.
They're beginning to talk to industry associations about how to train a new generation of sailors. Now, I like the Cargill model that we saw, because that was a regular container ship that simply was adding the sails. And if the wind was good enough, I mean, the ship actually could go faster on sail than they normally go, because the container ships move so slowly as it is.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple of there's you can have a self-furling or unfurling sail that's kind of like a when you're underway under diesel power, then that can be pulled in. If you're wanting a little bit of supplement, you've got sufficient wind direction, it can come out of and unfurl out of that. that. They also have the one which I've always found interesting are the spinning cylinders, the vertical spinning cylinders. You can actually those actually work to propel the ship forward. In the case of the French ship, it is just a straight up square rigger, right? And well, actually, I think it's a sloop type. Sloop, is that the word I'm looking? Shows you how much I don't know about sailing.
Well,
But it's a typical, setup to as you'd expect from an 18th century, 19th century sailing ship.
right. Well, it's interesting to see some of these ideas coming. Obviously, GPS and current weather reporting and stuff like that would sure make that a whole lot easier to predict whether or not
Yeah.
what route they should take, things
Yeah.
like that. So who knows? I just thought that one. It's always fun to have something about the sailing ships because it's so unique, and
It's the wind is there. Look, I don't know. I could probably pull it up and see how much wind is contributing to our electric power right now as we talk. Here in Nebraska. So it's there. It's free fuel. And so why not use it?
yeah,
And the
maybe if
sailing
there was
ship.
no wind, they could deploy. They could have some solar panels deploy, and they could run on electric batteries for
Well, I
for
think
a while.
some of those furled sails are in fact solar panels too. They can double for that because you can have flexible solar panels. So it wouldn't surprise me that you've got ships that would do that. I don't know if it provide enough current to
Enough juice.
drive
Well,
the ship forward, but certainly keep the electronics charged.
We interviewed the guys from Elf, and their one solar panel on the roof of the Elf was enough that if you weren't pedaling during the day, you could still go 10 miles per hour with no battery charge, was their claim.
Yeah, well, that's considerably different than a 60,000 ton
Right, I get that, but still,
container ship with 500 or 600 containers on deck. So
yeah. But I'm just saying, you wouldn't necessarily be just sitting dead in the water.
no,
You might only be moving a couple of knots or whatever, but it's still more than just hanging out.
And if they could say, if you I mean, I haven't followed real closely, but the America's Cup is going on right now, and those ships are so different from what the Shamrock and the Rainbow and those ships of the 1930s, sailing ships were like. I mean, these things, they're up out of the water. They're running on these, thin little underwater, skis, for want of a better term. It's amazing. So why couldn't we have other, ships, other types of ships? And in fact, we do. Germany is going to be importing the Candel. I think it's called the Candela, which is the ship being manufactured in Sweden that actually rides on, and why am I not thinking of the term here, but actually rides, lifts up out of the water and
hydrofoil.
Yeah, hydrofoil. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so there we're going to be seeing the Germans around Berlin, because they have a lot of canals and things there that they've used for decades, hundreds of years, to transport goods and people. So they're gonna be operating that electric. I think Candela it's called. So lots of exciting stuff. It's not just cars, right?
Right.
It's ships, and that's cool. Very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bill, I'm gonna go ahead and cut us off for today, folks. We appreciate you all watching,
Thank you
and
very
Bill will be
much,
back with me on Thursday. I'll be back tomorrow with